Alright, if you're in the market looking for a 1440p Ultrawide monitor, well, you might want to take a look at this. This is the Huawei MateView GT, and if you just take a look at the specs, it really hits everything that you would want in a high-end ultrawide monitor. It's 34 inches, the usual 21:9 aspect ratio, 1500R curve, 3440 by 1440 resolution, 165Hz refresh rate, FreeSync support, up to 90% DCI-P3 coverage with a delta E of less than 2, 10-bit color, 350 nits brightness, and because it's a VA panel, pretty good contrast ratio of 4000 to 1. As you can tell, pretty impressive specs, and it's made even more impressive when you consider the price. The Huawei MateView GT comes in at just under 800 Singapore dollars, which would translate to roughly 500 plus US dollars. Honestly, from my personal experience, I really enjoyed this monitor and I can wholeheartedly recommend it to you. But if you're thinking of picking this up, I feel that there are a few things that you should know about this monitor and some of the things that Huawei didn't really mention, especially if you just look at their website. But without further ado, let's talk about this. First up, design. And even though the MateView GT is Huawei's first gaming-centric monitor, it doesn't really look gamerish at all. In fact, it's rather minimalistic. The back is really simple. The bezels are minimal. The chin only has the Huawei font on it, not even the logo. And really, the only thing that stands out is the soundbar that's included with the stand and has a single RGB strip. We'll talk more about the soundbar in a bit, but overall, the design is just minimalistic and it really doesn't shout gamer to you at all. In fact, if you do not use the included stand with the monitor and instead mount the monitor on, say, a VESA compatible arm, it pretty much looks just like any other professional monitor, especially if you use it in an office. So it looks plain, but it's simple, and minimalistic is something that I really like, so it's pretty neat. In terms of adjustability and ergonomics, you get the usual feel that most ultrawides are capable of. There's a decent amount of height adjustment and tilt. What you don't get is swivel, which is understandable since it's ultra-wide and curved, no less. The only small gripe I have about the whole setup is that the stand doesn't really include any form of cable management. Your cables simply dangle down from the port and there really isn't any way to keep it clean looking, especially if you have your PC on the floor instead of the desk. A hook or an indent on the monitor stand to kind of route the cables through would have been nice. As for ports, you get one DisplayPort 1.4, two HDMI 2.0, a USB-C for power only, and a USB-C that supports display, data transfer, and 10W charging. Pretty standard for an ultrawide monitor, and that last USB-C port is basically designed to use with a smartphone or a laptop. Included with the monitor is your USB-C power adapter, a USB-C to C cable, a USB-C to A cable, and a DisplayPort 1.4 cable. Now at this point, I do have to mention something that I don't like about what comes with the Huawei MateView GT, and it's all got to do with that power adapter. Firstly, it's 135 watts, which is kind of nice but also kind of overkill because the monitor never needs 135 watts. But secondly, and what I really don't like, is the design of it. It uses the design that most light laptops come with, where the power adapter is on the plug head itself. Because of how much vertical space it takes up, I basically couldn't use the cable management tray that I have under my desk because it simply wouldn't fit. I personally would very much prefer if the power adapter is built into the monitor itself, but if not, the standard power brick would have actually been much better, ironically. At the very least, with the standard power brick, I can still use the cable management tray under my desk, or I can kind of use Velcro straps and strap it to the desk legs itself, which would have made cable routing a lot cleaner. But now we gotta talk about what makes the MateView GT a little bit unique, and it's all gotta do with that soundbar. Honestly speaking, it's pretty decent. I really can't complain. It's a stereo speaker with 5W each for a total of a 10W output, and it gets decently loud. It's not going to replace your shelf monitors or say a proper soundbar, but it's definitely much better than almost any onboard monitor speakers. If you just want a decent audio experience without the cable clutter, it's really not that bad. Really intuitive, really nice. But now we gotta talk about the main thing about this monitor, and of course, it's the panel. As mentioned at the start, it's a 34-inch panel with a 3440 by 1440 resolution, and in my personal opinion, 1440p is the sweet spot. At this screen size, 1080p would surely look too low res, and while 4K would look nicer, window scaling is still an issue, and you do require a powerful PC to power 4K gaming with high frame rates. Speaking of high frame rates, the monitor is capable of 165Hz, and that's enabled by default out of the box, as long as you use DisplayPort. 165Hz is really nice, especially if you have a PC that can make full use of it. Games just feel so much better to play, and everything is just buttery smooth. Even outside of gaming, when you're just simply browsing the web or managing documents, it's great. The monitor also comes with FreeSync support as well, which is a really nice touch. Though I do have to mention that the FreeSync support, or rather the FreeSync option in this monitor, is weirdly hidden for no reason whatsoever. By default, the FreeSync option isn't available in the OSD. Instead, you actually have to push and hold the joystick forward when you are facing the monitor for 10 seconds. You'll see a slight refresh on the screen, and only then would the FreeSync option actually appear in the OSD. Not sure why, but I guess it is what it is. Apart from gaming, for those of you who are looking at this monitor for professional work, it's pretty decent as well. The panel does cover 100% sRGB, 90% DCI-P3 and about 84% Adobe RGB with a delta E of less than 2. If you are someone who requires proper Adobe RGB coverage for your work and a more stringent delta E standard, this is definitely not going to perform up to your liking. But if you are someone who simply requires a good enough color accurate monitor with a slightly wider color gamut, this is pretty good. All in all, it's a pretty great monitor, and like I said, I very much enjoyed it. But at this point, I do have to touch upon the stuff that Huawei didn't really mention, especially when you just look at their website, and also kind of share with you some of the shortcomings or cons that this monitor has. That's not really Huawei's fault necessarily, but rather the use of VA technology in itself. First up, we have to talk about ghosting, or as some of you call it, black smearing, that's mainly associated with VA panels. That is definitely present in this panel as well. The MateView GT has a rough grey to grey of about 4 to 5 milliseconds and does come with overdrive settings to minimize this effect, but even so, it's not really great. By default, it comes preset at level 2, and you might think level 4 will be the best, but level 4 is far too much, as instead of ghosting, you now get inverse ghosting. Out of all the levels available, we would say level 3 is probably where you want to keep it at. This is just something you have to live with, especially if you're not getting the highest end VA. It's like having motion blur permanently turned on all the time, and the effect is only made worse if you play a lot of competitive shooters or perhaps you enjoy your horror games. While 165Hz is really nice, I guess it's not that effective per se if all you're gonna see is a blurry mess whenever you do a swipe or flick with your mouse. This is also the main reason why, although the contrast ratio is way better on VA as compared to IPS, it's a double-edged sword. You do get deeper blacks and it's nice for sure, but when there are a lot of dark elements in the scene, especially for horror games, it can become a really blurry mess. But again, it really depends on the games that you want to play. For instance, I mainly play Genshin Impact, and that's my main game nowadays. Genshin Impact on this monitor is rather enjoyable. The game looks fantastic and colors are nice and vibrant. Ghosting and black smearing isn't really an issue because dark scenes are few and far between, and I don't need to flick my mouse to look for an enemy in Genshin. Additionally, if you just want a nice display to watch movies or anime, it's great, and perhaps nicer than IPS even because you aren't interacting with the display, and this is where the contrast ratio really shines. But again, I need to remind you that it really depends on the games that you want to play. If you are someone who really likes your competitive shooters or esports titles like Apex, CSGO or say Dota, this monitor probably isn't for you, and on that note, you would also probably want a standard 16:9 monitor instead of ultra-wide. But if you're a casual gamer like me, and you play more Genshin Impact or say Minecraft, this is really enjoyable. But now let's talk about color. If you look at Huawei's website, it states 1.07 billion colors, which would mean a 10-bit panel. But now, the more astute of you guys might know that at this price range, it's very difficult to find a true 10-bit panel. So is this a true 10-bit panel? Honestly, I'm not entirely sure because I can't really check it, and even if through all the testings that I did, I still can't really discern a difference and whether it's a true 10-bit panel or not. But What I can tell you is that there is a catch to the 10-bit on this monitor. If you were to run the monitor at a full resolution of 3440 by 1440 at 165Hz, you will be limited to 8-bit. But even if you try to choose 10-bit in the AMD or Nvidia control panel, it will always revert back to 8-bit. In order to get a 10-bit signal, you will have to drop the refresh rate down to 144Hz. Now, 10-bit will be selectable in your graphics card control panel, and it will also state 10-bit in Windows. But here's the other thing, if you want 10-bit at 165Hz, you technically can. All you gotta do is turn on HDR. With that, you can achieve 10-bit, but in this case, Windows will specifically state that it is actually 8-bit with dithering. In my experience, I honestly can't really tell any difference between 8-bit and 10-bit, or even 8-bit with dithering / FRC, and I don't know if I can trust what Windows say. But in any case, my suggestion is this. Run the monitor at 144Hz and run it at 10-bit. Honestly speaking, that's the way that I would use this monitor, and it's my preference. To me, the difference between 144Hz and 165Hz is negligible. I can't really tell the difference. And yes, although I can't tell the difference between 8-bit, 10-bit and 8-bit with dithering, at that point, I guess I would just trust what Windows say and I'll just run 10-bit. For me, it's more important that I get 10-bit because I do a little bit more color work, but again, it's up to you. If you want a full 165Hz, by all means, go ahead. Just know that you are restricted to 8-bit. On that note, my only advice is to not use the HDR. HDR on this monitor is not great, not at all. Simply because it actually doesn't even have HDR 400 certification. It's just HDR compatible. If you turn on HDR on this monitor, everything just looks really washed out, and even if you play games with it, it just doesn't look right. So, in my honest opinion, just don't use HDR. Either 144Hz at 10-bit or 165Hz at 8-bit, both at SDR. Lastly, I do have to mention about viewing angles and how it ties into professional color work. The viewing angles aren't great with this monitor. There's a reason why the highest end professional color monitors are mostly IPS, and now with OLED. For one, not only does IPS offer better color accuracy and consistency over VA, but better viewing angles as well. Now you might argue that VA can reach the same color accuracy and cover the same color gamut as IPS, and that's true, very true. But what it still lacks and is inferior to IPS is the color consistency across the panel, and it's more of what you visually see on the panel itself, and that's got to do with the viewing angles. Because of how VA works, the horizontal viewing angle isn't that great. Just shifting my head a few inches left or right is enough for me to notice a visible shift in color while looking at the same spot on the screen. In order to actually see the actual color accuracy and maintain that consistency across the panel, I have to sit right smack center and of a certain distance away from the monitor. If I'm the sole user, that's alright, but in a professional setting, that's hardly the case. If I'm the editor doing some color work, I would usually be sitting in with, let's say, my senior editor or my producer or my director even, and at that point when you're sitting side by side, or let's say he's behind you, he or she is behind you, you won't even be looking at the same color at the same spot on the monitor, and it's because of viewing angles, and that's just not great. But now, if you're fine with all that I've said about this VA panel with regards to color, I would still at least recommend you get a colorimeter and calibrate the display, because the out-of-the-box colors definitely aren't that accurate. All in all, despite what I've just shared about this VA panel, I still very much like this monitor and I can wholeheartedly recommend it. It's been a great experience, and if you just take the pros and cons and weigh them against each other while taking into consideration the price, the pros definitely outweighs the cons. If you just want a great 1440p Ultrawide monitor with 165Hz refresh rate, which performs pretty amazing for most games while still being quite decent for some work, this is really awesome, especially for the price. Again, for just under 800 Singapore dollars, roughly 500 plus US dollars. So yes, I can definitely still wholeheartedly recommend this monitor. It's been a great experience. Just know that you know what you're looking for in a monitor. If you have any questions, let us know in the comment section down below. If you'd like to, do check out the affiliate links in the description. If you do, thanks for the support. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Till the next one. See ya!